Can't tell you the number of times in my marriage that I thought my wife's words were nonsense. Finally started figuring out a few years back that she was right about 90% of the time. And maybe I should listen to her more. How am I doing? Am I listening to you anymore?
She's still laughing.
She's laughing, that's a good sign. When the women came back, one of the translations says it seemed to them, to the disciples, like an idle tale. This translation says nonsense. Seemed like nonsense, an idle tale. When Jim Nestigan describes this, he says, yeah, it's kind of like, you know, men think, and this is sexist, by the way, I'll just say that right out, straight out, so. Men think, yeah, you know, it's like all women, you know, they read those romance novels, and they think, you know, everything's going to have a happy ending, and, you know, because that's what they read in their romance novels, and so, you know, that's what these women have come up with. They've come up with a happy ending to a terrible story. Nonsense. The women come in a futile effort to ward off death. If you have been around a body that's been dead for more than 3 days, you will never forget the smell. I have many times as a medic done that, and it's not a pleasant smell at all. And so the women are going to the tomb to try and ward off the smell of death. They do it with spices. They wrap the body in cloths, and they try and put as much spice and smell in there as possible to ward off the smell that they know is coming. To cover it over. It's almost like it's a protest, an illusion against what we know is coming. That's how they went. But while there, they saw a couple angels. It doesn't say in this translation that it was angels, and others it does. It says it was, but you know, it's two men, and their clothes were gleaming white like lightning. You ever been around a lightning strike? I remember when we were in the Midwest on a mission trip, well, not the Midwest, we were down south in New Orleans, and we were working on a house, and a lightning storm came, as they often do in summertime. And I was upstairs working on the electrical part. I was putting in wires, they weren't hooked up or anything. And there was a lightning storm outside. And all of a sudden, a lightning strike hit the metal roof of the house next door. That'll put the fear of God into you. There was a Jamaican household. I went back to see him the last time we were there, and he had an old grandfather who spoke a very, very thick Jamaican accent. And I couldn't figure out what he was saying, but he was yelling something about the fear of God, putting the fear of God into you or something. You know, he said it over and over again. That was loud and bright. So white like light. They got who this was. They put them down on the floor. You know, their faces to the ground. If you go into a room with a bunch of people like this, and you ask them, have they ever seen an angel? I've tried this several times. About 30% of the people in the room will say yes, they have. There are still angels around today. My closest connection to angels was at a death where, and I didn't see it, but 4 other people did. And I had my back to the hallway where the man who had died was, and the people were on the couch facing me and the hallway, and they all said at one time, "Did you see that?" And I said, what? And they said, an angel just went down the hallway. I turned around to look. It was gone, you know. I never get to see that stuff. Must be a reason that I don't get to see it. But so I think there is an angel there. Anyway, they saw these angels that told them this idle tale, according to the men. The men didn't listen. They didn't listen to the women. And this is one of the reasons that you know this story is genuine. It's because if you were making this stuff up, you would never have the women be the first witnesses. Ever. They were not considered in that day reliable witnesses. So if you're making this story up, you would say, well, let's have somebody else find, you know, the angels, the empty tomb. They were not to be considered. The disciples and the women at first could not get past death. And that is true for all of us. It's hard for us to get past death. When someone dies, it's hard for us to imagine anything past death. Today we celebrate as the sun comes up. I love this. As the roosters crow, as the birds make noise. We used to have this service inside, and I always had a tape of birds when people came in. I don't need the tape anymore. They're here. And this is the second year in a row we've had fantastic weather for this service. That's wonderful. But as we sit here, let us not treat this as an idle tale, but as a true story. A true story. And if it is a true story, it should change the way you think about Jesus. If it is a true story, you should never look at Jesus again the same way. If it is a true story, you should never treat his words the same way again. Because his words, his actions, his life are from God himself. They are God himself on this earth, telling us, sharing with us what God thinks, what God wants, what God believes about us, about the world, and about what God is doing in the world. And what Jesus says is that he is the resurrection and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. He is life itself. He is our very life. Jesus, if you'll notice, whenever he gets 10 feet away from a dead body, it rises. Somebody says he was bad news for the funeral industry. He is bad news for the funeral industry. He is the resurrection of life.